Good morning, everyone. The School Innovation and Turnaround Committee is now called to order. Roll call, please.
Dr. Bofi? I wish we had been. Dr. Bofi is not present. Mr. Castile?
Here.
Mr. Castile is present. Dr. Davis? Dr. Davis is not present. Mr. Davis?
Present.
Mr. Davis is present. Ms. Ellis? Present. Ms. Ellis is present. Mr. Garvey? Mr. Garvey is not present. Ms. Holloway? Present. Ms. Holloway is present. Mr. Morris? Present. Mr. Morris is present. Ms. Orange Jones? Present. Ms. Orange Jones is present. Mr. Rock? Present. Mr. Rock is present. Ms. Voce? Here. Ms. Voce is present. You have a quorum.
Thank you. What's our first item on the agenda, please?
Your first item is on page 1, item 2.1, consideration of a status report regarding types 2, 4, and 5 charter schools. The department recommendation is to receive the 2019-2020 annual report on types 2, 4, and 5 charter schools.
All right, may I get a motion, please? Ms. Kara Orange Jones, Mr. Rock seconds. Any discussion, please? Department, board? No discussion. Any objection to the motion? Motion passes. All right, next item, please.
Your next item is on page 105, item 2.2, consideration of the 2021 request for applications timeline for all charter school authorizers and the 2021 common charter application. The department recommendation is to approve the 2021 charter school application process timeline, authorizing the department to amend the timeline as needed, and noting that BESE will be notified of any revisions, and to approve the 2021 common charter school application.
Great, may I have a motion, please? Been moved by Mr. Rock, seconded by Mr. Morris. I understand that there is a presentation by Dr. Peterson. Dr. Peterson, floor is all yours.
Last month, the summer 2024 application cycle came to an end. In that application cycle, we built in 2 intentional places to garner feedback from the applicants, one in October and one in November. We focused the October survey was about process and timeline, which is my favorite measure. And then November focus was about feedback and suggestions for improvement to help us to be able to reflect other processes in which we can walk into, but also the time to really make sure that for applicant feedback or ways that we can improve the process. On the next couple of slides, I'll highlight a couple of the takeaways from the October and November survey results. Here we have my organization clearly understands the rules of procedure for the chart application process. These are the snapshots that include our questions that we asked. The chart RFA deadlines were communicated effectively. Also that the deadlines allow my organization enough time to submit a quality application. And this is a question around transparency. Additional questions that we asked was around the ease and clarity of the application, as well as whether the application allows the organization to highlight the strengths of the proposed school. Question around the capacity interview, allowing their organization to present strengths of the school.
Just for the rest of the board, the presentation is on page 162 in your package. You're welcome.
As well as the RFA process. Next are a few highlights from our November survey, where it allowed our applicants to open response. One question, how do you feel about the RFA process now that you've completed it? How does that feel to change the process? Highlighting here is making sure that again that there's cohesiveness and a difference that they felt between the district and the state experience. Are there any thoughts regarding improving the RFA process that they would like to share? And again, thinking about that comprehensiveness around the district and the state. 1 to 2 most effective parts of the process as it relates to the third-party interaction, the capacity interview and draft recommendation, other than the draft recommendations were targeted and truly gave the opportunity to address concerns before the final recommendation. A piece of feedback that we received around the overall process being improved is providing more workshops for new applicants to assist in understanding the rigorous process, as well as raise some of the pieces that we could provide more assistance on in financial template and ease of working with that. Once we took into consideration all the feedback that we received in both the October survey and the November survey as well our own experiences going through the process, we also looked back to the National Association of Charter School Authorizers, Principles, and Standards, and we began to reflect on those and making sure we were aligned. There are 3 core principles for charter authorizing that NACSA creates the foundation for the standards of quality charter school authorizing and guides authorizers in work, which are maintaining high standards for school, upholding school autonomy, and protecting school student and public interest. Additionally, there are quality school authorizing standards, and each of these have not only just the standard, but also substandards and advanced standards built in which we really make sure to dive into deep, thinking about how to make sure that our processes align, not only to our feedback, but also best practices and authorizing standards. The other component that we looked at, of course, is also the investment policy, and thinking about our authorizing responsibilities as an authorizer at the state level. Taking all of those things into consideration, we began to rethink the process components, the way in which our process runs. And thus, you will see for our summer 2020, this is an outline of the process by which we follow for the summer 2020 cycle to highlight all the components of that process. In reflection and revision, we've revised those process components. The blue type indicates the new additions to the process. And again, that were resounding from our prior applicant feedback, as well as when we dove in a little bit more into the standards and principles of aligning that practice. The new process components are as follows. The first is the LDs provide orientation sessions to interest and charter applicants. The purpose here is really to provide our interested applicants the opportunity to learn about the application process, the evaluation, the timeline, deadline, but also accountability. As we know, getting through the application process is only one part, but an applicant also has to know how they will be held accountable throughout the charter term, understanding the school standards and all of those components as well. This is something that we did in response to the applicant feedback that we heard around wanting to know more upfront and ongoing. And so building this into our process is something that we will do monthly, so that any interested applicant in the state is able to tune into this, obviously virtual, to learn more about the application process. The next component is a letter of intent submitted to the LD. This allows the applicant to intentionally engage with the authorizer prior to the full submission of the application, as well as for the authorizer in receipt of things such as a letter of intent. You have an idea of how many actual applications to plan for, which is really pertinent in planning with the third-party evaluator for the submissions of applicants. It also gives us a way to engage earlier with people that are interested to ensure that they have attended one of the orientation sessions to learn about the application. Again, keep all that information up front to provide for a smooth application process. The next component, the eligibility determination form submitted. Previously, these documents were actually embedded within the application as part of the component. We are only just taking those out and adding an additional step by submitting those prior to the full application. We believe that it is important for the eligibility determination to be made prior to the full submission, just to make sure that they have met all those criteria before actually submitting a full application. The next component as part of the new process is to make sure that we have an intentional place to review the process timeline and tools with the applicant. We did this informally, but wanted to make sure that in our internal timeline that we intentionally build in touch points throughout that process to check in with the point of contact and the board chair to really make sure that they have transparent and clearly articulated deadlines, as well as an intentional place for us to answer questions and provide them any support that they need throughout that process. Another component that we're adding is the application evaluation by an internal charter school review committee as well as a stakeholder charter review committee.
Dr. Peterson, would you mind pulling your microphone just a little closer? Gotten a comment that you sound real muffled online, so that might help. Let's give it a shot.
Okay. I can project.
Please do.
So the application evaluation with the internal charter school team and stakeholder charter review committee does not take the place of our third-party review team at all. However, it asks for additional support, but really data triangulation as we think about our third-party evaluator. The internal charter school review team would actually be comprised of internal experts within the agency that represent various application components and provide and speak to a perspective on that. Our stakeholder charter review committee, those would be utilizing some of our existing structures to get perspective of parents, teachers, and students in reading those application components. The discussion with both of these committees becomes really rich, as well as a way for us to determine any gaps that we need to push to our third-party evaluator to make sure that we're asking those questions intentionally within the capacity of the group. The next component is the LDE and the third-party evaluator reading the individual systems of appealing applicants. One of the things that we noted after in reflection of completing this last cycle is really making sure that we embed an intentional time to make sure that we touch points with our local systems as we go through an appeals process. To make sure that we, one, have the third-party evaluation that was provided to the applicant, but also a time for our systems to talk with us about their rationale for their reasoning for the decision, as well as an opportunity to essentially submit any materials and supporting materials for that rationale. Lastly, we have the charter school presentation during a public meeting. Currently in BESE policy, we outline for our local authorizers that prior to a final evaluation of the charter applicant proposal, that they must hold a public meeting to receive public input on that charter presentation. One of our things that we want to do as we think about the policy implication is better align the policy with practice, but also align the things that we're outlining for our local authorizers, that we are doing as well for our state authorizers, and making sure that those two things are aligned. And so with that, this would allow our charter applicants to present, do a 5-minute presentation in front of the board during the FIT committee of their proposal of their application. Currently, we have our applicants, they don't necessarily come to the committee meeting until at the time of the final evaluation, at which they utilize usually having to defend their position on their application. This allows us to have in the beginning a built-in time for the charter school to present their proposal, the board to be able to ask questions, as well as there are time for public input in that form before the actual evaluation of the application. In addition to just the process components, there's also a level of transparency that we want to make sure happens in our process. And those are some of the internal things that we're taking on as it relates to the website and the availability of information on our website. Not only do we have the application, all the components of the application, but also the transparency that as we go through this process, the documents throughout that process are uploaded to the website and accessible for the public to follow along with the process. And that is articulated to applicants in the application for them to know that something will need to be redacted for us to post on the website. But for each component of the application, once that information is provided to the applicant, it will then also go onto the website, again, for the community and public to also be able to access the process as they go through.
Dr. Peterson, would you try turning your mic on and off one more time just to see if we can get better projection?
Is this better?
Much better.
Okay. So next, once we think about the actual process itself and the things that we wanted to make sure that we embedded in the process to have better alignment, we also knew that we also had to look at the actual charter application. The charter application at the state level is utilized by all of our local authorizers as well as the common charter application. We also pulled out 2 standards as well for alignment with NACSA. And in alignment with these standards, we really knew that in addition to written policy, we also want to provide an opportunity for our local authorizers to be a part of the revision process of the application, being that they utilize this common charter application. And so we created an engagement opportunity for all of our local systems. During our monthly charter authorizer call and system leaders calls, we made a call to all of our leaders and leadership in the state to state whoever would like to be a part of this working group to revise the application was welcome to do so. We established a working group and really happy because some of these people are here today. With East Baton Rouge Parish School System, we had Mrs. Andrea Opinski. For NOLA Public Schools, Ms. Christine Barker and Dr. Danilyn Hippolyte. And for St. Landry Parish School Board, Mrs. Angela Casimir. They
And we have,
committed-
go ahead.
They committed to, I don't know that they necessarily knew it on the front end, but they committed to about 6 or 7 sessions where what we did was really go question by question on that application. As authorizers, being able to have a work group and have some honest conversation about the previous application to ask ourselves if the question was written in a way that it was giving us the information that we needed in order to make a decision on operating a school, authorizing a school. Some questions were yes, some were no. We needed to revise. We also needed to push in and think about other things in which were important in the landscape that we needed to make sure to be voiced in the application. And through that process, we were able to then leading to some revisions in the application. Those application revisions went into 2 buckets. One was structural revisions and the other were content revisions. The structural revisions really were hinged upon introductory pages with information about Louisiana education, an overview of our current charter school portfolio, an outline of our eligibility requirements, an explanation of each applicant process component for the purpose of transparency, as well as establishment of clear headings. The content revision specifically really focused on more rigor of questions requiring of the applicants to intentionally identify and provide a comprehensive plan to serve their intended student population, a demonstration of capacity to serve a diverse student population that is embedded not only within the diverse learner section, but also the academic plan, school calendar, school schedule, school culture, behavior management, and professional development, requiring applicants to provide a detailed hybrid learning plan, requiring applicants to provide a plan of support for social and emotional health of students, describing a plan to recruit and retain a diversified staff, as well as a revision to our financial template with MFP projections. And at this time, I would really like to thank Deputy Superintendent BESE and her team for really taking on the ownership of that finance template to make sure that we set up our applicants on the front end for making those budget projections and making that template user-friendly as well. Once we got to a place where we were able to revise all of these questions and think about all of the structural components, we then engaged different partners to provide applicant review and feedback. And some of those were the Louisiana Association of Public Charter Schools, New Schools for Baton Rouge, New Schools for New Orleans, and the National Association of Charter School Authorizers. We gave them our draft, asked for additional feedback. They got that back to us, and we also tweaked it. I also want to thank my colleagues, our other assistant superintendents, who also gave feedback into those applications as well to make sure that we were accurately asking questions that related to some of the things that they had going on in their departments as well. At that time, when we finalized a draft, we then provided different times during our monthly authorizer call for authorizers to come on to let us walk through the application, to provide feedback if they wanted to be sent a draft, and to do that as well. And that's the application that we presented to you today. I also want to take a moment. We do have 2 of the people that were part of that working group who have a moment that would like to speak to you all about that process.
Great. And that would be Christine Barker with New Orleans Public Schools. Please come forward. And Angela Casimir with St. Landry Parish School Board. If you would likewise come forward too. We'll take up Ms. Barker first. Would you introduce yourself, speak loudly into the microphone, and I think you have 3 minutes?
Great. Thank you and good afternoon.
Part of the presentation, so as long as you need.
Thank you. I'm Christine Barker with New Orleans Public Schools. I'd like to express my appreciation on behalf of New Orleans Public Schools for the opportunity to collaborate on the Charter RFA development. To my knowledge, this is the first year that districts have been invited to participate in such collaboration, which has resulted in a more robust and more rigorous application that will lead to stronger applicants and therefore higher quality charter schools. This revised RFA process makes for a smoother process for local authorizers when starting with a base state common application that is aligned to collective understanding of what makes a high-quality charter school and from an equity lens aligned to national best practices. We look forward to future collaborations between the district and the Department of Education. Thank you for your time.
Great. Thank you.
Good morning, Angela Casimir, St. Landry Parish School Board. I'd like to take this opportunity to first thank the department for allowing districts to have an opportunity to have a voice in the application process. It is very important as we reflect on the application that we are now able to see that there is a higher level of rigor that has been established in the work that has been done forth by our working group. It is extremely important as a district authorizer that we are able to have a voice in the process. And having that voice in the process, it's the new components that have been added that are going to be extremely important for us as a district. The first of which is going to be the letter of intent. As a district authorizer, it is very important for us to be able to plan accordingly, to know with a third-party evaluator how many applications that we are truly going to be reviewing as a district. And I just want to say that as a district, this takes time. Time not just for a third-party evaluator, but also for a district to do their due diligence in reviewing the applications that are set forth before us. So it is extremely important that we are able to actualize the work of this work group and to see the new application as it's being brought forward for permission today for approval. And I'd also like to thank my superintendent, Mr. Patrick Jenkins, who's here today, for allowing me the opportunity to work with Dr. Peterson. I think she was very right. We really probably didn't realize what we were signing on to at the front end, but we can honestly say that we are very appreciative of the work that we were able to accomplish as a work group for this application to go forward. And lastly, just a comment, it's quality, not quantity. And I think that as authorizers, that we all look forward to ensuring that we have high quality charters that will be able to provide services for our students. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you to both Christine and Angela. Definitely appreciate working with them and just having the thought partnership. I think that as Christine stated as well, being able to have more conversations with our local authorizers, being able to collaborate on things like this is really important, which is why we also bring forth just looking at practice and policy alignment and really making sure that what we are asking our local districts to do, we too are doing that so we can have a very comprehensive process here in the state of Louisiana, as well as being able to have more conversations such as this when both processes mirror as it relates to the components within the application. Here you'll see a couple of tables will just show in terms of past practice and what it looks like in terms of proposed policy as well as the application. And we know that practice informs policy and allowing us to really tweak some things that had become past practice, but now proposing into policy. One is our online tools and resources, and those were one-on-one conversations as needed. The new process component we're embedding is an intentional place for having orientation sessions for our applicant. The proposed policy allowing these both authorizers locally and LDOE to conduct charter application orientations. But for the 2021 cycle, what that looks like and actually is going to be the LDOE to hold the ongoing orientation sessions. Local authorizers wouldn't begin to do that until the subsequent cycle. We were building out those materials first, and we'll do those monthly starting in February. For past practice, the local school board, we state in per policy that the local school board shall notify the LDE of receipt of charter applications and any board action taken on such. As mentioned, the new process component here is that we'll have a letter of intent to be submitted to us on the front end so that we actually know, in addition to not only the local districts letting us know, but also who intends to apply to BESE. The proposed policy actually including the letter of intent. But for the 2021 application, obviously our local school boards, again, continuing that collaboration will continue to inform us, as well as the letter of intent, but this will not disqualify the applicant at this time. Another past practice is a component of the application submission that the applicant submits the eligibility determination forms. As stated, this is embedded in the application previously. We're just pulling that out for moving forward in the 2021 application. Next is that our local authorizers hold a meeting to receive the public input on charter applications. As mentioned, this is per policy. The new process allows us to align with what we're asking our local districts to do and to do that as well. Lastly, for a policy that our local school board will notify the LDE of receipt of applications and any board action. The new process, we are intentionally including and embedding a place where we meet with our individual school systems of the appealing applicant to understand the rationale for the decision, as well as supporting materials. Within that, for the 2021 application, we will do that with our systems and the appealing applicants. I'm proposing that we move forward. We will also begin in that 2021, after we have some of our appealing applicants, to do that the same way in which we held surveys with our applicants. We will do that with our systems to get feedback from them on how that process went, what would be helpful, and any tweaks that we should make moving forward to the subsequent cycles, as well as any policy implications. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Peterson. Any comments or questions from the board? Mr. Morris.
Yeah, Mr. Castillo, I just wanted to thank Dr. Peterson for the effort. I got a lot of positive feedback from folks in my district that weren't here today that participated in the process. So I appreciate not only the engagement, but the level of engagement and the focus on quality, and particularly the 2 items on page 5 of your handout, the opportunity for the board to hear from the applicant earlier in the process, and then the level of engagement between the LEA and their participation in the process to provide that feedback. So thank you.
Great, thank you. Dr. Davis?
Yep. So I have a question. Again, thank you for this hard work and going through this process. Well, I have 2 questions, and it relates to the last slide on practice and policy alignment. The LDOE is to hold a public meeting to receive public input on the charter school applications. Are those meetings going to be held in the district where the charter school is supposed to operate, or are they going to be here at DOE?
It will be here at DOE.
Okay. And then my second question relates to that same slide. It says LDOE and the third-party evaluator meeting with the individual school districts of the appealing applicants. When I go back to page 111 of our packet, which talks about the individual local school system meetings, it says that this component of the process is not evaluated by standards and is used for information purposes only. And so my question is, first off, what does that mean? Like, so you're meeting with them, districts, to learn the rationale for why they rejected the charter school applicant, but that doesn't have any bearing on what you decide and how you evaluate the charter school application?
Yep. So the purpose of the meeting with the local system and the LDOE, along with our third-party evaluator, is one, to build in a process where we have the actual reason for which they denied that applicant, to understand if there are deficiencies that they see, if there are any things that we need to be aware of as it relates to gaps or things that are not aligned with their district authorizing priorities. At that time, the third party will then take that into consideration and be able to, along with our internal stakeholder group, as well as the stakeholder group that we have, to see if they have made any changes in that to provide any closure of that gap. The purpose of stating that it's not evaluative, because there's not a standard related to that or a number allocated to that component of the applicant, but more so for informing the practices of the third-party evaluation and making them aware of what the potential deficiencies are in that application.
Okay, and so my next question, I'm not sure if it's appropriate for this particular item or the next item on the agenda, so I'm happy to be told that it needs to be moved to the second one. And so just thinking about reasons for districts to reject a type 1 charter. So for instance, statute gives our policy gives districts the ability to adopt standards that are higher than BESE's for authorizing charters in their district. So what happens if a charter is rejected at the district for not meeting that district's higher standards for charter authorizers? When they come and when they tell our third-party operator and DOE, this is the reason that we rejected them, where do we take into account the fact that that district has higher standards than BESE does for authorizing charters?
Yep. So I think there's 2 components to that. One is we have several authorizers who have different criteria for applying to the application. So that's one component. And that criteria is related to experienced operators wanting to open a new application. And specifically, we have seen districts, again, that have different letter grades or requiring the schools potentially to have all of their schools in their portfolio potentially to have a B or higher, where our policy in section in 126 and 519 essentially has all of our schools have to be a letter grade of a C. So on that component, as it relates to the criteria question specifically, is that they will have had to meet that higher bar before they even got to us, because in order to get to us, they have to have that denial. So they will have already met that bar to meeting that portfolio criteria of application. If we're talking about the evaluation standards, we do have a separate process, and each of the applicants that are coming to us do have a right to go through our third-party process with those standards, which is a separate process from the district. But part of creating that place where we actually have that conversation is understanding that so that we can be aware of those pieces. One, if it's the evaluative standards or if it's the criteria, because those are two separate components.
So I guess, is it then, so BESE has the ability to authorize a charter that was rejected by a local district because it did not meet their standards. They can still come to BESE and we can go ahead and charter them even though they do not meet the standards for the district that originally rejected them.
If we're talking about their evaluation standards, if they receive a denial, however they got that denial, whether that is based at the local level, they have a right to come to this, go through this application cycle with a new third party that is nationally aligned to provide an outcome for them that may be recommended or denial, but based on the standards that are set forth within this process.
So so they could not meet academic standards for a district in terms of the letter grades of their existing schools and then come to BESE and we could say yes.
No.
Okay.
In order for them, so for the criteria, so for example, there's a district that states that in order to apply for a new application, their maintaining portfolio has to have a letter grade B or above, right? In order to even get through that process, they would have to meet that and be denied. A
Okay.
denial is what they bring here, not the fact that they didn't make it. So they would have to have met that bar
Okay.
already
So-
before they went through that local process.
So they don't even get a rejection from a district, they get dinged before they even get to the rejection part.
If they would have to actually meet that in order to submit an application for that
Thank you.
district.
I appreciate that clarification.
Great. Other questions, comments from board members? We had one other public comment. Ms. Sarah Vandergriff wishes to speak with respect to this item.
Thank you and good morning. Sarah Vandergriff with the Louisiana Association of Public Charter Schools. I apologize, I believe my card said 3.1 instead of 2.1, so I'll give you a new one if you need it. We at the association are very supportive of these changes and are very appreciative of the efforts that Dr. Peterson and her team has gone through to make these changes. From the structural point of view, we are supportive of the increased communications that will happen between applicants and district, the district and the state, and then potentially the state and applicants if they need to. Some of the complaints we've heard even as of today is basically it stems down to communication issues. We think from the structural point of view, letters of intent, it doesn't catch districts off guard anymore. They're very prepared. We're also finding that districts themselves need a little bit more education on what the charter process is. So we're glad that they were able to have input into the application process, as well as stakeholders like ourselves. From the source substantive point of view, we cannot be more supportive. When you think about what an A-rated school needs to be for 21st century learning, they have to be ready to provide all these extra levels. It's not just about reading and writing and math, but if you're not addressing sort of the needs of all children that you're serving, then you're not going to be successful. And so we did submit the changes or proposed changes to our charter school community. One current charter school community leader or charter school leader came back applauding the Department of Ed as to the changes. While it even requires more detail, the school leader said this will make for a much more thoughtful application process and will really try to help weed out the applicants who are ready, who are not ready. She then laughed and said she's glad she doesn't have to go through the process anymore because it is that hard. But we think that this overall just brings the application process even better. I've told you before that the state of Louisiana has one of the best application processes in the country, and I stand by that. And I think that this takes it even further to start addressing some of the other issues that we know schools need to. And if you start weeding that out in the application process, it's just going to make for better schools. And again, some of the frustrations have been the sort of disjointed communications between applicants and districts and between this district and the state. And we just think that this, while sometimes there's sort of mismatched efforts to do this, this puts in a more sort of coherent process. We look forward to continue working with the Department of Ed through programs like our Charter Application Apply Yourself program. And we also encourage the Department of Ed to increase training opportunities for authorizers on what does it mean to be an authorizer. That's a totally different piece in and of itself, as Dr. Brumley can even tell you. It's one thing to go to the application process, and then it's another thing to be a high-quality authorizer throughout the time of that charter term. So anyway, we just want to say we're super supportive. Thank you all, and let us know if we can be of any further help.
Great, thank you, Ms. Vandergrift. Any other comments or questions from the board? Ms. Kira Orange-Jones.
Just a quick thank you, Dr. Peterson. These changes are thoughtful, they're nuanced. I had an opportunity to meet with you and your team in the past week to share that feedback offline, but I wanted to share it in front of my board colleagues as well, just that, some of the more nuanced areas of the process that were addressed here were really thoughtfully done, and I really agree with Ms. Vandergrift about one of the key improvement areas being that of communication, and I'm very much looking forward to see how this process sort of enables us to even take our charting work to the next level. So thank you, and thank your team.
Great, thank you. Any other questions, comments? Any objections to the motion? All right, motion passes. Next item, please.
Your next item is on page 174, item 3.1, consideration of revisions to Bulletin 126 charter schools regarding charter school authorizers and the application and approval process for BESE authorized charter schools. The department recommendation is to approve as notice of intent revisions to Bulletin 126.
Great, thank you. So motion by Ms. Orange-Jones, seconded by Mr. Morris. Any discussion? I know that there's a formal report. Comments from the board? Ms. Dr. Davis.
Yeah. I have a couple of questions about language. So this is page 175, the very last sentence on the page. It says, "The charter application process shall be a competitive process by where any entity meeting eligibility requirements may be approved." I'm wondering about kind of the origins of competitive, because competitive usually implies a ranking where you were competing against other applicants, and so that you might pick, say, the top 3 applicants out of 10, not any of them that meet the eligibility requirement. And so I'm just wondering if competitive is the appropriate word choice there?
Yes, so that, I will say that is actually my mic's on now, okay. That is actually a change that we did not make any substantial change there. We just created a structural change by moving it, but no content was changed in that. It was already embedded within BESE, so we are open to thoughts or considerations on that.
I'm open to word that, maybe I'm crazy and thinking competitive means something different than it does, but I don't know. Thoughts?
I'll defer to the department if they want to wordsmith it some more. That's the original language, I understand, from the bulletin. So if there's a desire to consider that, because it's not a change, one thought is, do you want to consider that for another time or not? I think it's a perfectly appropriate observation.
That's fine.
Okay?
Sure.
All right. Any other comments, questions? All right.
I have one
Sorry,
more,
go ahead.
sorry, this won't be fast. And this is on page 177 on A-A.2, number 3, where it talks about at least 60% of the board of directors shall reside in the parish or parishes in which the schools seek to enroll. Do we have any idea, just out there, how many board members of our charter schools reside either outside their parish or even outside the state? I mean, I'm just thinking back to the constitutional amendment that just failed where LSU tried to, allow an out-of-state member to be on that board. And so just thinking about it in terms of stewardship of state and local tax dollars, I'm just wondering how many do we have any information basically on that 60%?
We don't at this time, but we can get that information for you based on what we have it for our board.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Great, thank you. Any other questions, comments? Dr. Brown?
Dr. Peterson, if you don't mind, just because we're in 2021 and the education world has shifted, just briefly update the board on how you incorporated some content that was specific to virtual instruction throughout, it may have been the previous item, but I do think it's important to flag that for the board so that they're aware.
So throughout, as we know, our educational landscape has shifted as it relates to what it requires to operate a school. We can't just think about just the brick and mortar, and we can't separate that out with those that are intentionally choosing to do virtual instruction. But our brick and mortar obviously now has to also think about hybrid learning plans. So we intentionally embedded questions around the intentional planning for hybrid learning, not only the academic instruction, but also technology, as well as the resource allocation, ensuring that that's embedded within their budgets. Also having an intentional plan to make sure that not only staff is trained on that or that they have a learning management system, but also how that they plan to make sure that parents are engaged on the front end of understanding what things would trigger potentially going into a virtual environment or having to go move through hybrid learning. So building those pieces in, again, in the academic component as well as the financial piece. The other component is making sure that our students' social and emotional health is also attended to, not only to their academic focus, but also the whole child, and making sure that we have intentional questions around social and emotional planning and allocation, again, of personnel and resources to support those needs for students. Again, embedding that in the plan so that at the day one of school, all of those things are planned for, and we don't have to put our schools in a reactive posture.
Thank you, Dr. Peterson.
Great, thank you. Again, any questions, comments, any objections to the motion? All right, motion passes.
This concludes your agenda.
We are adjourned. Thank you.